It's always easier at the beginning of the night as opposed to Good evening, everyone. My name's Ben. I'm the founder and buyer at Novel Wines, and we do all the lovely wine here at Ronnie's restaurant. So hopefully you enjoy this evening and all the wine you try here if you come again. But I would like to introduce our very special guests tonight, who is Nat and Toby from Bluestone. And they are the growers and owners of Bluestone Vineyards, which is the fizz English sparkling you'll be trying this evening. And we met a few years ago now, I think.
Good few years ago.
And I went to school with Nat's sister a long time ago. So there's always been some McConnell-Franks relationship there somewhere. And we're very pleased to introduce them as the newest English producer at Ronnie's. They're both vintage sparkling wines and absolutely delicious, as I hope you've already discovered. And they've all been paired with Ronnie's canapés, starter and main course. But without further ado, is Nat to say a little bit more about Bluestone Vineyards before we get into a fireside chat through the meal, have a little bit of question and answers. And then you can ask Nat anything you like. I'm sure it'll be fine. About English winemaking, English viticulture, and
or about Ben and my sister.
let's not have those questions. But yeah, thank you very much. Just Nat for you.
Thank you. Cheers, Ben. Do I stand? Do I sit?
Just
sit. Everyone okay? Yeah. Good. Flowers at a level height as well, so you can see my face. I actually had a haircut yesterday and trimmed my beard, so normally we're quite hairy-looking, sort of homeless people, looking like we're out in the vineyard a lot, kind of behind the scenes, not really doing a lot. So we don't do this kind of thing very often. We were just chatting with Jane here, and it's actually Ben who's roped us in, obviously, to do this, which is fantastic. We're excited, but also a little bit nervous. So do bear with me and Toby. He's my silent sidekick here. He came for the food. He saw the menu and was like, "Yeah, I'm there." So it's good to have him here as well, because he doesn't get out of the vineyard very often. So I think this is a nice treat for him as well. So a little bit about Bluestone. Well, I mean, where to start? We can start at the beginning. I mean, I've been told we need to drag this beginning out a bit, because I've been told that the drinking is very important as well as part of this evening. So you need to drink copious amounts of the classic cuvee. So you know, if you've got some in your glass, then maybe have a little extra sip before we get into the serious stuff. So Bluestone was originally sort of conceived actually in the middle, in the early 2000s. So for those of you, well, I'm going to assume that no one knows anything about us at all. Is that true? Yeah? But I gather some of you did try us at the last tasting with Ben that they held here, right? And I'm sure you all bought a couple of cases, of course. Yeah? Just not, that's fine. So early 2000s, Salisbury born and bred. There was a petting farm on the edge of the Salisbury outskirts, and tourism farm. It's been there for a long, long time. You probably went there as a kid as well, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe? Yeah. Maybe not that young, hopefully not. Yeah, that'd be a bit weird. Well, that's true. Okay, I should, yeah, so it's a family attraction, and the main sort of focus of that is the conservation of British rare breed animals. So very much an educational focus. We ran that for a long, long time. My parents, it came up for sale, they bought it because it was too good an opportunity to pass up. And they took it on, continued running the petting farm. There was a small B&B on site, and they sort of took that on. They didn't have a clue what they were doing, as well as, you know, look at this. So there are 9 of us kids as well, so there's a big family, so a lot of people to look after, but they were seeing it as a large workforce, which I think there's definitely coming into the light these days. Exactly, and we're working on that as well for the next generation. So. And the sort of first step that they took at the business there was to look at how they could add value and improve the asset there. So they quickly put in planning to establish a cafe, restaurant, build on the accommodation side of things, and increase the sort of attraction for the family element. So we've got soft play, we've got a 70-bed accommodation there, and a cafe and shop. Primarily aimed at sort of families, young children, sort of between age, I guess, 2 and 6 maybe. So great for grandparents to bring kids, great for parents to come. The thing that was missing was the bit that, and we understand this now as adults, that sometimes adults just need a little bit of rest, and they need a little bit of something just to get you through the day. And I'm not advocating, daytime drinking or morning drinking. Or evening drinking, or just continuous drinking. But I tell you what, it's definitely been well received. So the idea of the vineyard was thought about originally not that long after that they just put in all the planning and put in a lot of money to basically develop the site there. And the reason why that came about is because two of my uncles are archaeologists. At the time, they were working with Time Team, and they were doing a dig that was fully funded. They had lots of basically cheap labour because it was a load of students that they could just ride off the back of, and they were doing it near Stonehenge. So we're about 4 miles away from Stonehenge. They finished it up early, essentially, and they thought, well, we've got all these resources in the area. My dad, being my dad, was just like, right, come up, we'll just basically put on a load of food, we'll have some beers, and we'll camp out in the field. We'll do some sort of site survey, essentially. So just did some sort of test pits, all kinds of different things. And we actually found loads of incredible artifacts. So Iron Age pottery all the way from the Bronze Age all the way through to Roman times, Roman coins, flint arrowheads, things like that. So some really incredible history. And we actually found evidence of an old Iron Age settlement as well. So post holes, and it was actually something that we actually recreated as well as part of the farmstead and educational side of things. So recreated it, wattle and daub, thatch roof, things like that. Really, really fun. And again, that was a family project at the time. And that was a great time as well. I remember being a young lad, and there were all these lovely, university students that we could sort of ogle at and drink a few beers with. That was quite fun. And at the time, again, this is where it kind of starts to get a bit, is this really the truth? But it's the truth. And it's funny how it works out. So originally from Downton as well, south of Salisbury, and there's a chap in Downton who had long been a winemaker in Champagne. He was very close with my uncle. He obviously came up for a bit of food, a few beers, and it was actually him that first suggested that we look into it. So he sort of said, the site's quite nice. It's a nice sort of gentle south-facing slope. Soils are very similar. And I guess this is where the story might become a little bit more on the sort of track of where everyone else sort of came into this as well. And we got a few consultants in to look at it at the time. It was found to be suitable, but again, alas, we just put a lot of resources into the developing the farm park side of things. And obviously my parents realised how labour intensive it was. They were running the farm park, they just expanded that. Our kids were still, all of my brothers and sisters were still very young. So they were like, right, no, absolutely not. We can't do that. We can't afford to do it, and we can't afford the time either. And I'm going to shorten this bit, fast forward 10 years, so about 2015. My brother and I were at loose ends about what we were doing. So I was in Birmingham working at a myeloma specialist immunological diagnostics company. My brother was working in the Mediterranean on luxury yachts. And it was getting, as lovely as that sounds, it was getting a bit stuffy, wasn't it? And a bit much, and we were just getting a bit bored. We wanted to progress in what we were doing. So we thought we'd come home, take stock, and figure out our next move, with no intention of doing anything in the family business. Sorry, my sister very much had a firm grasp of the family business at that time. She had come back and she was at the helm and doing what she was doing with it, which is fantastic. And she's making a very good go of it these days as well. And as you do at the time, all these farm diversification shows, you go and you sort of learn about what else farmers are doing. There's all the glamping, all the wedding stuff that was all very big and continues to be very big. And of course, there was one chap in there that was going, oh yeah, English vineyards, that sounds like a good idea. And of course, we were the ones that were the suckers that were drawn to that. We were like, oh, what's this? No one else is at this stand. Let's go and chat to this guy. And we were like, yeah, this sounds really fun, really interesting, and that really appealed to kind of us being physically involved. We wanted to develop and diversify the farm itself. The farm park being tourism, it's very seasonal and obviously aimed at essentially school kids. We've obviously got the school holidays as the times of year that we can actually generate any income, and then come winter time, any income that we've made basically we go back into the red again, and then we're back in that cycle. So we were looking to break that cycle. So it was really, as much as it appealed to us from a I guess a nice idea, there was kind of a passion. We didn't really, I must admit, we probably didn't drink a lot of wine at the time. You probably did, actually, being in the south of France.
Not really.
No? Okay. I think I remember you had one pretty good evening with Mum and Dad, and you were drinking lots of nice champagnes. But again, you probably wouldn't have remembered it. Anyway, so I heard snippets of that story. Talked to a load of guys. We got in a couple of different consultants again to sort of survey the site to see if it was suitable. And it ticked some boxes, not all the boxes. Now, the perfect site is very hard to come across, and these days you'll pay a lot of money for that perfect site. So again, the real benefit to us was actually the land was under our ownership and it was suitable to a certain point. Now, the one main negative impact that they really sort of foresaw on our site was the fact that it was quite high up. So the highest point of our vineyard is about 146 metres. And they sort of say for producing premium quality sparkling wine in a climate like ours, the maximum is about 200 metres. So we're still within that sort of range. But we're on the edge of the Salisbury Plains, which is notoriously windy. It's super flat. There's not a lot else to break up that wind. But actually we are sort of really, I don't really understand how it works, but we're really nestled in on the side of a hill. So we're south-facing, but we're really protected from the southwesterly winds, which are the main sort of winds that we get during the growing season, which is well, the most important part, because during the winter we don't really care where the winds come from because there's nothing there to disturb. So we were a bit, cautious about that, but at the end of the day it was my dad that kind of pushed it over the line. He was like, well, we don't know until we put something in the ground, and I'm glad that he kind of had that approach. He's a fantastic bloke. He sometimes oversimplifies things, but in that instance, I'm glad he oversimplified it, because his argument was, and when it comes to wine, it all sometimes can be quite self-serving, quite pretentious, like someone with a load of money that's just putting it in because they wanted to do it as a vanity project. And his point of view was, I have a physical skill. I can build houses. I can build a house and I can sell a house. If we plant the vineyard, I can build a house, we can sell it, and that will basically help offset any losses that we have on this project. So at the time, that was great, and I quite like that logic. Probably wasn't as simple as that in reality. But anyway, went ahead. So planted 10 acres, and that was basically the start of mine and Toby's journey, because bearing in mind, at the time that we planted, neither of us really enjoyed drinking wine, we didn't know how to grow grapes, and we didn't know how to make wine. So that was really where the journey started. So it's better, again, kind of like this, I probably don't know if I should mention it, but like the chef, we threw ourselves at the deep end. And we enrolled ourselves at Plumpton. So has anyone heard of Plumpton College at all? So at the time, not so much now, I think the Royal Agricultural College are offering courses, but it's basically our specialist university or college that offers viticulture and enology courses. And a lot of our workforce, basically in the UK wine industry, and that have gone abroad since as well, have been trained at Plumpton. So it's a really fantastic place. Some really big names. Again, so if there's any real geeky wine people in there that know some English people, you can throw them at me and I can probably say, yeah, they went to Plumpton. We're in good company there. So I studied the MSc in viticulture and enology there. To do that, I had to do my WSET level 2. Has anyone done any WSET courses in here? No? Who's a wine lover in this room? You must be if you're here. Or is it more food? The wine is kind of like secondary.
It's both.
Yeah, it's both. It's both. Okay, fair enough. So if anyone's super keen on wine, and you might have a bit of time and you want to learn a bit more about it, I would really encourage you to do WSET. Start with level 2. Level 1's more about the serving and things like that. Level 2 is where you start to get to the nitty-gritty of regional sort of variations and I guess the typicity of certain varieties from certain regions.
What's it stand for?
The wines. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, if you wait a year, I can teach you.
You're getting a diploma?
I do one in here. I've got the diploma. Yeah.
Have you?
It's the Wine and Spirit Education Trust.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll do some WSET courses.
Yeah, there we go. Well, look no further. There you go. Oh, this guy's monopolising it, isn't he? But yeah, so I'd really encourage you to do it, because that for me was kind of, in the wine trade there seems to be this thing that everyone has that bottle of wine that is the thing that really turns them on to wine. For me, it was that, and I guess it was a number. Same for you, wasn't it? And again, that was quite out of your comfort zone, but it was incredible. We got to taste some nice wines, not some amazing wines, but some really nice wines. But just knowing, just understanding the sort of differences and why those differences come about and how they sort of are expressed in the wine, that was really fascinating, and that was what got me hooked. That was where my passion was started. And there were some fantastic characters on the course as well. You can't, like, people who like wine, I think they're just. There's something about them, and I guess there's a difference, I guess, between people who drink wine and people who are a little bit more interested. But either way, I think all wine people kind of get along, and if they don't, just drink some wine, and eventually you'll get along. So that really was where I fell in love with wine, and it was a quick sort of. Process from there. So that was in 2015, started Plumpton in 2016. By this point, the soil, the site had been prepped at Bluestone. The vines were, the first was 7.5 acres were planted in 2016. And then we had the remaining 2.5 acres to take us up to 10 acres planted in 2017. So on that, I was still studying at Plumpton at that time. And then essentially Toby and I we went off to different places and we learned some different things. We tried to put ourselves out there as much as possible. And in my opinion, yes, it's great having the theory behind it. You need it. but it's the practical side of the stuff is what you need. You need to go through the motions of the growing, of the making, and again, although some elements translate from place to place, Toby at Bluestone, his value. I mean, he's a fantastic bloke, and he cracks on with it. Anyone who's a viticulturist, like they really they don't get enough of the limelight. I think it always seems to be winemakers and things like that, and all the wine salespeople. Sometimes. But yeah, he understands Bluestone, and that is for us is the important thing, and that's what we want to showcase in our wines, and that is where although we're at the beginning of our journey, that is what will become apparent in time. And we understand this is a process, this is a journey. We're 8 years in now, but I mean, I don't know, I can't make it mind if it feels like a long time or not. It's a really weird thing, a vineyard and a winery, like everything happens slowly but really quickly. 8 years in, we've barely scratched the surface of where we are, and I think, again, coming into the winemaking, the fact that we're able to sit here today and have a real product, and again, I was just saying this earlier on, it's almost like it's so strange that people are there and enjoying the wine. We can't compute it. It's quite difficult. But that's testament as well to Hambledon Winery. We're at Hambledon Winery to make our wines, but that is such an essential part of our journey because, as you learned probably too much detail now, that we were very new at this, but we needed to work with a high quality wine producer to make sure that we were setting that bar for us, but also creating that mentor relationship as well. So that, for us, it's kind of twofold. Great wines from the get-go and invaluable knowledge from the get-go as well. And that really will sort of springboard, I think, our work at Bluestone.
Feels like the perfect opportunity to toast Bluestone and to try the canapés as well.
Yeah.
So, cheers,
Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the evening. Oh, that is good.
It is good.
It is good. Did you try it before? I don't know. Was it you guys?
Yeah, we have tried it. Yeah.
No, I mean, we only get to try it flat.
Oh, really?
But because, we're in the tasting room after we've brought samples, the bottles that are left out back because they're no good anymore because the bubbles have gone, that's what we get to taste. So it's really nice actually tasting with bubbles.
Which is perfect opportunity now for Nat to introduce the first wine, talk about the classic cuvée. So share about this one. What do you think?
So, first of all, raise a glass if you enjoyed the classic cuvée.
If anyone doesn't.
Don't worry, I was going to say, if anyone doesn't. So the classic cuvée, so 2018. So 2018, for those of you who know your English wines, I guess specifically, at the time was heralded as the vintage of a lifetime. Now, it's funny that since then we've had 2 more vintages of a lifetime. We've come into an incredible sort of decade of grape growing, so I think for us at Bluestone and for those who have started since that time as well have been incredibly lucky. So the 2018, the vintage thing is very interesting, and we can dive into a bit more detail about that, but I'll try and stick to specifics about the classic cuvée. So this is a blend of 52% Chardonnay, 35% Pinot Noir, 13% Pinot Meunier. With this wine, there's a very small proportion of reserve wine in this as well. I think it's about 3 to 5% in this wine. A very small proportion of it has been fermented in new oak. We tend to steer away from using too much new oak in our wines. And again, getting in the nitty-gritty of things, sometimes in better years, you can sometimes integrate new oak with the wine a little bit better. But again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. So I didn't want, we don't want the reserve component to be the star of the show, we want the fruit to be the star of the show. At Bluestone being a very small vineyard, we want to be able to showcase what it is the vineyard can do. And like I said, we're at very early days, so it will take time before that will really, I don't think we'll ever be there, to be honest, in terms of the end, because I guess every year we're changing and developing. But this style is very much sort of champagne-like, and that's kind of by design. We wanted a wine at the early stages of our existence to be slightly recognisable for those who are unfamiliar with English wine, to almost kind of give it, I guess, a bit of credibility. It's quite a vulnerable thing to put a product out there and to make so much of it, and then try and realise the price that we need to realise in order to make it sustainable and continue doing what we want to be doing. So I think that was very necessary. So for me, you kind of get a bit more, like Ben said, there's a bit of texture, there's a bit more depth of flavour to this wine. Lovely golden colour as well. It's quite difficult to see the dim light in here, but if anyone's got anything left in their glass, then it's quite difficult to see in this light. But again, always great to look at against a white background to look at the colour, but it's a nice sort of golden hue. So we want that freshness. So like I said, it's champagne-like, and the emphasis on that, and I want to come away from describing it as champagne and the champagne method, because it's time for the UK to start owning our wines as our wines. But there's very much an English style, and that comes through in the freshness of the wine. So really fresh, vibrant acidity, really clean and crisp, really fruit-driven as well. So for me, it's really sort of citrus, lemons, really crunchy green apples like Granny Smith apples. And for me, bearing in mind that I do taste this wine or the bit flat quite a lot, so again, I find myself searching for all the things, or I sometimes pick up something that I haven't quite come across the first few hundred times I've tasted it. So for me, it's quite a little bit of lime as well, almost like a lime zest. So there's something a bit sort of textural about it as well. And I don't know why with the lime, I don't know if it's because I really like sort of Asian cuisine where they use lots of lime and coconut and things like that. So for me, I always kind of associate lime and coconut. So sometimes I get a bit of coconut coming through, but I don't know if that's my association with lime. And then for me, beautifully smooth on the palate. Again, really cleansing. And that's the thing I love about English wines. They often just have that freshness. I love champagne. I absolutely adore champagne. But I'm finding it more difficult to find a champagne that I like the finish in the mouth. It sounds a bit really. This is where I might lose some people. It's a bit wishy-washy. But for me, the textural part that Ben, again, not many people think about the textural part. Like, it smells great, tastes great, but then what's that feeling in the mouth when the liquid's in your mouth? And then when the liquid is gone, what is the feeling then in your mouth? Is there like a nice sort of weight, or is it just dry? Like, is it, are you gagging for water or more wine or whatever? I think you're gagging for more wine for good reasons with this wine, because it's very drinkable. But like I said, we're looking for weight, we're looking for texture, but we want the fruit and the acidity to be the star of the show, because that's what the UK does, and that's what we do really well. So, yeah, I mean, this wine, I really like where it's at. We released it last summer, so it's been 3 years in the cellars, so we always age our classic cuvee for a minimum of 3 years. And that is kind of our benchmark, and then ideally we like another 6 months on cork. So this would have been disgorged in, actually it will say on the bottle. It should have been August, but I have a feeling this may have been no, it wouldn't have been late as November. It'll be August. So that would, so that we're kind of there with the aging on the cork. So again, for me, this will continue to improve as well in bottle. So for the next sort of 4 to 5 years, I would like to see this wine, if there's any left, I'd like to be sort of there at that point in time. I think it's got all the characteristics and hallmarks to be a wine that can age with grace. After that point, and again, we can maybe talk about this at the end when we can get into the Q&A and a bit about aging, and maybe Ben can weigh in and here as well. But for me, aging a wine is kind of complex, and it does depend on your taste for wine as well. Obviously, there are some more standardized formats with certain regions and wine styles. But the wine sort of will change after a certain point. So it will have ageability beyond that sort of 4 to 5 years, but it will be very different. And I think as long as people are aware of that and they like that, then great. Obviously, if they think, nah, that's not for me, then oops, hopefully you've drunk most of your couple of cases before that. So that's our, have I missed anything on there? So I've waffled a lot.
No, I think it's clear. I think the interesting thing is, if you look at English wine, I started writing about it 8 years ago, and even in that short period of time, the patience with it is the bit that's made all the difference. So the knowledge, the patience, the looking after the wine and waiting for it is still young, which is why most of the trades sparkling production is vintage led, because they're releasing the stock. There's commercial pressures as well, but it means we can showcase years, fruit, styles, quality, and the biggest change in the market has been people's ability to sit on their wine for longer, balance out some of the acidity, because I'm sure you've all had the English fizz or English wines that are very, very sharp and offset. I think the important thing here is you're softening some of that, still very high in acidity and fresh, which is beautiful with food. And I actually think people undersell sparkling as a gastronomy wine and the ability for it to pair with food.
Yeah.
But yeah, softening the acidity and that longer lees aging time has made English fizz as world class as it is, and that's happened in a small 8-year window, whereas champagne have had 300 years to perfect it. So we're catching up fast on the French.
Yeah, we're quick learners.
Yeah,
Quick learners. Just crazy enough to try something stupid. Yeah, so and I think the other thing that I always like to talk about with, I guess wines in general, but I think ours in particular. So again, that glass there, that's still the classic, isn't it?
that's still a classic.
Yeah. So I mean, so if anyone's still got any left from their first glass, the welcome glass compared to this one. Sorry, I'm nursing mine a bit more, so I'll catch up with you in a bit. Is temperature. Temperature has a massive impact on how the wine comes across. It impacts the aroma quite massively. There are ways, obviously, to help mitigate that when you've got the wine in your mouth, and you take the wine in the mouth, and you're inevitably heating it up in the mouth, obviously, and then obviously you can draw wine over the sort of palate, and that helps volatilize a lot of those aromatics as well. So that's one way of doing it. But again, that's quite a lot of effort, and not everyone can do it as well, and it just makes people feel a bit awkward. You end up dribbling on your neighbour, and that's not often the best thing to do. If you know each other, it's fine. And so for me, I love this wine ever so slightly warmer. So a lot of people drink their wine straight out of the fridge, which is great. In some varieties and some styles, that really works. But for me, the character of this wine really comes out at about 10 to 12 degrees. So that's equivalent of taking it out of the fridge, leaving it for 10 to 15 minutes. And that, for me, is where this wine really shines. And actually, I will taste our rosé later, and that, for me, is the same for that wine. But versatility is something huge in these wines. They're fantastic chilled. They do behave as an aperitif. They've got lots of lovely fruit in there that really stands out. And again, the acidity, it's not that bracing acidity. It's fresh. It's just really well balanced, I think. Really fine. But then when it starts to warm in the glass, that's where you start to get this complexity coming out that we've built into the wine through the aging, a careful proportion of the reserve wine. You just get beautiful. You start to get a bit more of the toast. For me, it's really honeyed on the nose. Sometimes people have described a bit more sort of like stone fruit flavours, like peaches and apricots. Even sort of verging on sort of dried fruits as well. So like raisins and currants, things like that. Not so much brioche for me. I don't think it's more like toast, but that might come with our later disgorged wine, I suppose, where we've got a bit more contact with the lees in the cellar. So yeah, that's.
How does it compare to English fizz people have had before?
Yeah, we love it.
100 times better.
Don't be shy, come on. We welcome negative comments as well. We'll see you out the back.
It's more aromatic.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Bit more expressive. Yeah? Bit more expressive, you get a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that even with the glass that you've just been brought out?
That was
the first one?
We were handed out.
Yeah. Yeah. Jumps out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this is where, although we want to be, it's quite a strange thing that we, at Bluestone, what we want to be accessible but also exclusive. It's quite strange, but obviously at the petting farm, we've got families, and at our tasting room, we do just tastings on little paper compostable cups. And it's amazing, and obviously it's not the most conducive vessel. You don't really want to be, showing fine sparkling wine in these little cups. But we embrace it. It kind of works for what we're doing there at the moment. But it's amazing, the aroma. As soon as you pour that, into that little cup, people are always, I always get people going, wow, like they can really get the aroma instantly. And I think that sets, that sets you in good stead. I think you're kind of really excited about what you're going to taste next, I think. But yeah, you're right. I think it really jumps out of the glass, doesn't it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, because Champagne, Cava, the wines we normally drink, they're made in a style that's very focused on the lees aging and the palate, as opposed to the aroma and the fruit. Generally, English wine has always been focused much more on the fruit character of the wine. So you get more beautiful aromas, and as long as it follows through on the palate, which I think this one does,
Yeah, I think so.
then you have the whole experience, which is what makes English wine different from Champagne and gives it its own identity.
Yeah.
What you're after.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think, like I said, with the Champagne thing, and it's not knocking Champagne, but I think the point I was going to make was champagnes that you find on the supermarket, like again, I don't want to use generic because everyone has their different point, I guess, in terms of price and what their preference is. But I find that the champagnes on the market at supermarkets, for example, are just a little bit too sweet for me. I think again they're trying to appeal to that wider palate. And the term, I guess the real term or the proper term is cloying.
Yeah.
Cloying, but like I say gacky. Like it just for me it like sticks quite unpleasantly in the mouth, and it's not something I particularly enjoy, and the sugar just sticks out a little bit. And again, that's something that I think for us, I mean, at the end of the day, it's sort of a preference. You know, we're making a wine that we like at the end of the day, and we just hope that people share the same opinion. But we try and we don't deliberately go for lower dosage, but we tend to have dosage. So dosage is the final time that as a winemaker you get to balance the profile of the wine. It's quite an incredible process. And again, something I'd love to invite you all up to the vineyard and do. It's something that we do have. This is not me plugging any sales thing, but we do have a membership that I'm going to change because I don't like it. But we want to get people involved with the process to sort of experience it because it's really fun, but quite incredible as well. Something like the dosage. So I'll try and quickly explain it. So before we release a wine, we essentially disgorge the wine at a number of different sugar levels. So brut is typically between 0 and 12 grams per litre. There are little segments in between there, but maybe Ben can explain that a little bit more a little bit later. That's kind of his remit. So what we do is we literally add 1 gram a litre, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 12, and we then taste them all. And it's amazing. You'd think the more sugar you add to something, the sweeter it gets, but it doesn't work like that, and that's how incredible it is, and that's why we have to do this dosage tasting essentially. So we're literally smelling and tasting, making notes, and we start to eliminate things, and then we come back to the ones that we liked, pour fresh samples, so we taste, make notes, and until you sort of really narrow it down on the final sugar level that you're looking for. And it's incredible what it does. So obviously you're adding sugar, so it can make things very sweet. It can make things quite, again, that gackiness. It can make things stick and heavy, not in a pleasant way. So what you're trying to find is that the perfection of that mouthfeel, but also the positive sort of, I guess, the positive impact from the sugar adding to the nose as well, to the aroma. Because otherwise, if you add too much sugar, you can get a really, again, sweet, a really candied sort of, again, we're going to use I don't often use this word, but bouquet. Since we're surrounded by lovely flowers. That's the wrong kind of bouquet, isn't it? English is not my strong point. And again, that mouthfeel. So for me, like I said, I really actually concentrate on mouthfeel. I won't say anything now for the rosé, but again, let's just say the rosé I think is a little bit distinctive. And we can talk about that when we drink the rosé. But yeah, so it's a really fascinating element of the winemaking process. A small part of it, but pretty damn crucial as well, to be honest. And again, I'd love to be able to. It's a process that I'd love to be able to do with people, just to share that and for other people to experience it as well. It's no secret, and that's what I want to do. I want to make it a bit more, not take away the mystique. I want to show people the mystique, so you can revel in it with me.
I think the impressive thing with sparkling winemaking as well is everything is ramped up 10 times. So in a still wine, there's a lot you can get away with in a winemaking situation to hide faults, build wines, make it ready for the market or whatever you want. In a sparkling wine, if you don't have clean juice to start with and you don't look after those grapes in the vineyard, when you press and second ferment it, you bring out all the faults to 10 times the level they are in still wines.
Yeah.
So the work in the vineyard is incredibly essential for good sparkling wine production. The picking date's really important. And then that nuance of dosage and sugar addition makes huge impacts on the final wine, especially in an aging journey as well. So the longer under cork, if you have a higher dosage, it changes a lot more. So getting all those bits right, the blending right, all of it correct over a 3-year period before you release it to the market, 3.5 years, takes a lot of effort. And I think, simple as Nat might want to make it sound, it's a difficult thing to get right. So to get it right in every vintage is an impressive thing to do.
Yeah. So and just touching upon that, and to give Toby a bit of a spotlight, and deservedly so, I think. And every viticulturist and winemaker will say this, and so I'm not going to shy away from it. the attention that we pay in the vineyard it's so meticulous, and I think again this is really a huge benefit of being only 10 acres. And this is not to knock the larger producers, because they have the resources to manage that just as well as a small vineyard. But again, I think the knowledge that we have of the vineyard is so intimate, and this is the journey that we're going to be going on. So over the years, we will discover something new about our site that we didn't know the previous year, or in a cooler year, a particular part of the vineyard that we thought we knew behaved in such a way and gave us such a quality of fruit would be very different. So we're going to have to take that into consideration when we, year on year and year in and year out. But the fact that we can walk our vineyards on a day, we can get around the vineyard easily in a couple of hours, and that is a huge part of our quality, I guess, assurance is going around, we're observing, we're making decisions on, okay, actually we've just had some really bad weather. UK, like one of our main issues is mildews. If we get powdery mildew or downy mildew, they can affect the young fruit as it's developing, or even the canopy. So both are huge factors. Obviously, if you don't have any healthy leaves, you can't generate any energy for the plant to then put into the fruit and ripen the fruit. And if you've got no fruit, then you've got no fruit, or no wine, which is the most important thing. Thank you. So I think that's something that we're versatile, I think is what I'm saying. We're quite versatile and able to adapt to sort of certain weather events more quickly. But again, I think being small, we can figure out ways to be more efficient and get jobs done effectively, but then we've got more time to play and sort of do those little extra details that really change the quality of the wine when we get the grapes into the winery. And that's down to this guy. And we've had exceptional quality fruit even in tough years. So 2021, really hard, much cooler, lots of rain. The quality of the fruit was exceptional given the year. Now that was a steep learning curve anyway, learning how that translated in the winery, and we can go into more detail. I don't want to talk too much. So, well, I guess I'm here to talk, but stop me or start me. And I think the other important thing to note is that for Bluestone, we're really trying to focus on vintage wines, which, again, I don't know in hindsight whether, how old am I now? Whether 50-year-old me. But again, that's kind of what we're looking at now. Do we want to stay within our means? Do we just grow organically to sell our production at our site with a little bit of sort of trade here and there, just to sort of get out there and I guess appeal to a wider audience base that's not super hyper local to where we are. I think again that's always the worry, is that you're only going to be known where you are, and that it's not about being known, I suppose. But where we are as well, I think we've got a lot of potential from a tourism point of view, and wine tourism. Directly off of the 303, 4 miles away from Stonehenge. Stonehenge get 1.5 million visitors a year, so there's clearly a lot of people coming to the area for that specifically. But then even with Salisbury, everyone comes to the cathedral, Old Sarum, things like that. So I think if we do it right, we could really do very well, I think, and that I think gives us confidence and I guess the ability to grow more should we want to, and then pursue export markets, for example, because that again is another huge thing for English wine as a category anyway. I mean, our production is tiny compared to other regions, but there's a global thirst for English wine, and I think it's almost a bit of a worry in some instances, because we probably can't grow as an industry. We can't grow quick enough to quench that thirst, but also cater to the growing demand, but growing the brand at home as well.
Where's that
and maybe that's not too much of a
global
worry.
demand come from then?
I think the key markets for export in the UK are North America, Canada, Japan, Scandinavia. Is China?
Still.
Parts of China,
Really?
yeah.
Parts of China, yeah.
I suppose the appeal is the British brand.
Yeah, okay.
So
Right,
people
okay.
still want British products.
Which amazes me.
So you'll find it in the States. It will be in New York fine dining restaurants, for example, rather than mass available in retailers or something like that.
How important do you think Wiltshire is in terms of, and how important do you think it is generally about Sussex? Obviously now as a PDO, how do you think Wiltshire has a potential to become
I hope so.
an area in its own right?
It's a good question. I kind of want it to remain the secret that no one knows.
Okay.
So like Wiltshire will be, it's really difficult because again Wiltshire, the most of Wiltshire, I guess that's the beauty of again terroir and specific I don't know what the parcels or is it, what's the term in French? I'm not going to try and be fancy. Parcels. Like most of Wiltshire is basically the Salisbury Plain, so it won't ever be a huge growing region. But even with the few Wiltshire vineyards there's some really great quality fruit coming out. And again, I think that's the different landscape. The viticulture, the vineyard landscape in the UK is so different because of the way we farmed. I guess culturally and historically, we've always had hedges around our land, and I don't know why that is specifically. I don't know if anyone knows why that is. I know we used to obviously like riding horses and jumping over hedges, and apparently that was why that is because of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, maybe it's countryside pursuits, I don't know. Or maybe it's just land barriers and things like that. But obviously you go to, we were talking about Rioja over here, you go to those landscapes, and there's just vines as far as the eye can see. And although I can appreciate terroir is still a thing, it still exists, but when you're talking about microclimates in the UK, that's where you get microclimates, and that's where, even though being in Wiltshire quite high up on the side of a windy plain, you can still have a microclimate and grow great quality grapes for wine. So I don't quite think the PDO captures what people think it's doing. And I don't think we should. I don't think our soils are diverse and specific enough in terms of county, but the vineyards are. So I think that is diverse enough in itself. But again, we need the producers to tell that story.
Yeah.
Which again, I guess it could go that way, and I think it will be a balance. There'll be the larger producers that again are looking for the brand and looking for the non-vintage and looking for export and wider distribution, but there'll be the grower producers. So that's where I kind of align ourselves. So for those of you who may or may not come across it, like the grower champagne has become a bit more of a thing. Obviously, there's always a little bit of marketing at play, but that's kind of where I see ourselves really focused on the viticulture and letting the wine basically just do its thing, and we're just sort of ushering it to be as delicious as it can be, but we really want the heart to be the vineyard. If we have a tough year like 2021, we want to be able to explain that, but making the right decisions to make sure that it's a great wine all the same, but maybe it's something that was aged for 10 years because we needed a bit more development and flavour, and we needed a bit more weight to the wine to make sure that it was drinkable as a vintage wine, essentially. It's kind of hard to explain without, I guess, tasting it. But again, maybe another fun thing we could do before it gets. I mean, it was bottled last year, but again, we could taste it young, and you can understand what that's like. And then in 10 years' time, we can taste it, and you'll be like, yeah, I can see what you mean. I can see what you're talking about. But maybe that's it's a long time. But that's my view on PDO, I suppose. What's yours? You seem to have a strong opinion.
Yeah. Do you take bookings for 10 years ahead in case anyone wants to?
I don't think our CRM system is good enough. But
and 10 years ahead and make sure we get the same barrel we got 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Write your name on
We could definitely do that. We could definitely do that with the bottles. The barrel, and again, that's another amazing thing is the blending, the assemblage is. It's a very different. A sparkling wine is a very different beast to a still wine. All these on primeur wines, Burgundy, Bordeaux, and other things that are jumping onto on primeur. They're being tasted in the barrel. They're being graded essentially in the barrel and then being sold. But they change so much. But I guess there is that knowledge from those regions. Sorry. See, this is why normally I don't do much talking because I lose out on the food. Doggy bag. Also, I should have learned. I should know better after growing up in a family of so many siblings. What was your thing? Oh, the barrel thing. Yeah. Sparkling wine is very different. I mean, I think if you were to taste some sparkling wine in barrel and tank, I don't know if you would. Yeah, I don't know if you'd want to. Yeah, I don't know if you want to. Let's put it that way. Yeah, it's an amazing thing, like the transition from that point to the wine that we're drinking here today.
Who's been to an English vineyard before? Who's been to an English vineyard? Has anyone...
which one? Bluestone.
Has anyone ever never been to an English vineyard? Okay. Have you been to a vineyard abroad?
Yeah.
Well, first opportunity. Get down to Bluestone, see the vineyard, explore it.
Go for Painsy.
Yeah.
Go for what?
Go for the
Go for
Painsy.
blending. Yeah.
Go for Painsy.
I think
The petting zoo.
it'd be interesting to see, if you've not been to an English vineyard, the experience, because everyone is at the beginning and they're growing their experiences and the vineyard tours, and I think it's very experimental, welcoming, very community focused at the moment. So it's a good opportunity now to visit English vineyards and support local vineyards and go and see what's going on, because they kind of moved from a hobby shed vineyard production into this small producers all being very experimental and producing some fantastic world-class wines. And then you have a few that have gone off and spun off into these big corporate kind of English vineyards as well. But it's a great time to go and visit and explore and see how different they all are as well. And I think you'll get a very good experience out of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you said you had B&B as well, didn't you?
So this is no. So this is it's still there, but it's not B&B anymore. And mind you, I'm not sure if I would have wanted to visit it. Something that our mum was sort of the host. She probably would have got you working, I'd imagine, wouldn't she? So this is where it gets a bit clunky, and there's a bit of a disjointed element between the two businesses. So it's a youth hostel. But again, I think the thing that I guess us as Bluestone and as a family business as a whole, we need to kind of really find our niche and sort of lean into it. So for me and Toby, we want to be producing great wine, and we want people to come and enjoy that in the right environment. But that is expensive, building the infrastructure for that.
Yeah.
And we've got existing infrastructure. We've got an existing business that relies on that cash flow and that income.
Yeah.
So it's a youth hostel essentially. So we're an affiliate. So it's privately owned but run in accordance with the YHA. Again, the idea is it's family friendly, quality budget accommodation. So the way I see it is you get to spend your money on the thing that's probably the most important. The good wine, the good food, and then you can just lie down, nurse your hangover, get up, come and have a nice breakfast, and So it's difficult for me to say. Again, it depends on where you're pitching it, but. But that's why, again, we're looking at developing like a more of a glamping side to things. I think that would work quite well. So we're toying with that.
Some cabins.
Yeah. So, but again, it's finding the area for it. So we've got a 7-acre woodland, which would be beautiful. And what I really want is tree houses, really nice luxury tree houses like the Jute and Glen have, or something like that. That would be amazing. And there's some really nice spots like looking over the vineyard. So that is kind of what I would like. Again, maybe a bit cost prohibitive, but if we could plan it,
But do you
we
know
could work it.
about the guy who does the unique B&B bread and breakfast house? It's on BBC Two. He does tree
No.
houses.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Need to
have a
look that
look
up. Yeah.
on Plyer. It's called My Unique B&B.
Okay. Yeah,
He
I'll look
goes
that
and
up.
helps people, but he is a treehouse builder
Oh,
by
cool.
trade. So builds small niche ones like
Nice.
a single bed, log fire, small homes. That's his kind of.
Maybe we can get the BBC to fund it.
Yeah.
Get the whole build done on them. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And everyone could come stay for free.
Yeah.
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 It's going to hold you to that.
Yeah, I know, that's it.
So changing the subject. So what you said? You obviously you got the bug. What got you the bug? What was that light bulb moment that got you the bug?
It was my experience on the WSET.
Yeah.
And
And
it
was that level 2 just trying?
it was really. I really enjoyed it, and I haven't pursued more levels. There's level
Yeah.
3 and level 4's diploma, right?
Yeah.
And then I think from level 4 you can teach WSET. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So for me, this is really bad. Like I'm not the best student. And again, I don't know if I could commit myself to doing the level 3. I know it's a big step up from the level 2, but it was amazing. Like it's just so fun. Like, and again, going from zero knowledge to suddenly all this knowledge. But again, I guess where I live it as well. I think that helped the learning definitely, because I could understand it a little bit more. There wasn't a particular wine or anything like that. In terms of like wine, a lot of I guess winemakers and wine industry people, they get asked what their favourite wine is, and that for me is a really difficult question because I don't know. I know probably a wine that I liked last week, but I probably won't ever drink that again. For me, I like trying different things. And again, I guess that nature, that personality trait as well is quite. I think that comes into our winemaking as well, and that's what I like about the vintage thing. And I like about our limited production. Once it's gone, it's gone. We're on to the next one. It's a different wine, but there will be similar characteristics. And And yeah, I think that appeals to me. I'm quite a fickle person. I get bored quite quickly. And again, that. But I think that's great for what we're doing because the wine changes, the year changes, and keeps me entertained.
You want to keep things rolling.
Yeah, exactly.
If it becomes too samely, there's going to be a drop off.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. It keeps it fresh. It keeps it exciting.
Brand. You want the wine to be the brand, not the brand to bring you to the wine.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think exactly that. We're not competing on the shelf necessarily, except for his shop.
Yeah.
So you said it was a small production, but how many bottles do you produce every year then?
So when we're at full production, we can produce in any given year about 20,000 bottles if we don't get frosted or anything like that. That is split between across a number of different products or SKUs or whatever you want to call it. So our classic Cuvée and Rosé, that again, they're our core products. They're something that we strive to produce year in, year out. I think just because, again, they're not entry level, I don't know what the word is, I guess they become the consistent thing that people know and enjoy. I guess, again, a Blanc de Noir and a Blanc de Blanc, some people, especially in this room, you probably will know what those are and what they mean from a stylistically point of view. But again, if we're looking at the wine tourism to sell our production, again, the price point tends to be a little bit higher as well. So again, it's maybe a little bit more exclusive in that sense. So again, it's a lesser volume makes sense towards that sort of that method of sales. So it's about 4,500 to 5,000 bottles of the classic and the rosé, and then the remaining 10,000 will either be a small proportion of keeping back a little bit of reserve, and then if the year allows, it will be a Blanc de Blanc, Blanc de Noir, maybe a single vineyard type of wine, whether that be a blend or whether that be again a single variety, so a Blanc de Blanc or a blend of Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. Again, experimental. It really depends. So, as an example, 2019 we made a Blanc de Noir, which again is quite unusual in 2019 because 2019 was very much considered a year that was much cooler, lots of disease pressure, but our fruit was again great, fantastic quality, and we had some really lovely ripe Pinot Noir. And we're coming on to the rosé in a minute, and there's a proportion of our Pinot Noir in here, and I think for me that kind of that comes across. We've got some really nice ripe Pinot in there. And 2020, what did we do? Hot year, really lovely year. So the other limitation, again, is not conducive to the way we want to be making wine. Is Hambledon, as great as they are, they have a press that's a certain size, so we can't go down into the nitty gritty of the clones from our different sites. So that's why really we want our own facility, and that is the long.
Is that something you're aiming for?
Yeah, it is. It is, but the thing is, the more you think about it, the more you can talk yourself out of it, I suppose, because again, it's the cost, it's the time, and again, it's the complicate. You know, at the moment, like, getting glass is such a headache. You know, like the production of stuff is the cost of things are so high. I mean, last year we were lucky that we managed to bottle anything because apparently the bottles that were being sourced for us were actually double sold as well. So, yeah, so that was that kind of situation over the sort of COVID and the fallout from Brexit as well. I think a little bit of that. Yeah, so there's a lot of things a lot more plates that we need to spin. So there's really something fantastic to be said for Hambledon to really have the control of that. The way I like to describe it, and I'm probably not giving them enough credit, is that they do all the cleaning, we do all the fun stuff, but with them. So, you know, with that, and that's kind of often said in winemaking, is that 95, some people say 97% of winemaking is cleaning tanks and things like that. So you do have to be meticulous, and you know that attention to detail in the winery is key. But yeah, the fun bits we're very much on board with. It's just the cleaning. I know how to do the cleaning, so when it comes to it, I can do it, no problem. Get a Hoover in the tank.
Badly first time? Someone else does it? Badly first time?
No, I was pretty good actually. I quite like cleaning anyway at home, so it was something that I took to, you know, like a duck in water. Yeah.
Okay, so you have your main coming round now with the Cuvée Rosé, which we'll get Nat to talk about the wine in a minute, but this is the duck, and I think you can, when you get a fizz that has a nice savoury element to it, it goes really well with gamey dishes, and that kind of duck cries out for a bit of sweetness, which you have in the fruit of the wine here as well. And I think it should work pretty well together from a texture point of view, which we talked about a lot, but also that fruit No, this is good. It's important for this being different to what else is on the market. But I think here, whereas the Bluestone Classic with the first course was all about the texture, I think here it's the fruit sweetness with the meat is what works really well. So hopefully you'll find the same when you do the pairing. But do you want to introduce the rosé?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cuvée Rosé, and I think actually this is known as Rosé Cuvée because a labelling error. But same. It's the same good stuff in the bottle. So 2019 again, like I kind of alluded to already, really quite tricky year. But we didn't really think so. We didn't really know what the fuss was about. It was cooler and it was wet. So there was a higher disease pressure. The quality of the fruit came in superb, and again we surprised ourselves with I think what we could, the potential of what we could make in that year. So this rosé, 83% Chardonnay. Our wines tend to be Chardonnay dominant, partly down to our planting. Our planting is about 60 to 65% Chardonnay, 10% Pinot Meunier, and 25% Pinot Noir. So that's kind of the reason for that, really. Again, with the first 10-acre planting, it was about experimenting. So if we were to plant more, we know what does well and what we liked when that translates into wine. So we've got a good idea now that if we were to plant more, we would have a really good idea of what we'd like to plant from a clone, but also a variety point of view. This rosé, I don't want to describe it as Marmite because I think that kind of puts it into a category of Marmite, which is not comparable. But in terms of it being, obviously wine, as we know, and everyone will always say it, is subjective, but this for me is a wine that will either really surprise you that you really like it, or it's something that, again, it might not be to your taste. And I think that's partly down to people, the expectations of what a rosé, what it means to people, what a rosé kind of is. And at the moment, I think, in my opinion, there's a lot of rosés that tend to have a bit of a sweeter finish on the market, and that's fine. That I think is what I guess is broadly appealing. And the dosage on this is it's higher than the classic cuvée, but again it kind of is very well integrated with the rest of the wine, so it doesn't stick out. But for me, it actually comes across as fairly dry for a rosé, I would say. I don't know if anyone else feels the same. Has everyone tasted it? What do we think in general? Nice, yeah. But do you agree with that? Do you think it is slightly? Did it surprise you the fact, like the palate, like on the palate? Did it surprise you that it was slightly dry? Yeah. But in a good way.
It's not so sweet on the tail, so you get more of the texture and flavour for it rather than that sweet.
Exactly. So exactly that. So for me, and again, coming back to the dosage and it being, so not only do we obviously do 1 to 12 in whole numbers, but again, if you really want to, you can go to halves, you can go to quarters, you can go to eighths of a gram of sugar. And this is where we kind of did this with this, but actually we set it on 8 grams per litre. 8.5 was again too much. It was candied. It was really confected, really sort of like Haribo strawberries, like just too much, not particularly pleasant. And again on the palate, immediately made it feel sticky and gacky and horrible. Not a fine wine. But again, 7.5. It was a bit wild. The acidity was too fresh. It was a bit puckering. Took you back a bit. But again, finding that middle ground of 8, that's the wonderful thing about the dosage. For me, beautiful red fruits. It's actually changed a lot, I think. I don't know when you first tasted it. Do you remember? No.
Okay.
It's changed a lot in bottle. When it was first released, I was quite surprised and I was a bit concerned because I think there's some black fruit creeping in this wine, and I think that comes from the quite ripe Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier that's in this wine. But it was much more intense, almost cassis-like when we first released it. And again, this is where time on cork really works wonders. So it's mellowed out, it's much more delicate, much more prettier red fruit. But again, it still has, like, I like to describe it as like English hedgerow, like bramble, blackberries. So there's that kind of leafiness almost to it. And again, that kind of helps me sort of rationalise there's a bit of texture in there as well. So kind of like, I don't know, some people actually describe this as woody. And I don't think that's unpleasant in this wine, but there's like a textural woodiness maybe to it. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right thing I should be saying.
There's definitely a savoury element.
Yeah. Maybe I'm not sort of pinpointing it right, but I guess this is the way. That's the fun thing with wine tasting as well. One person smells and tastes one thing and would describe it as one thing, and someone else would describe it as another. But so yeah, I think it's very different. Savoury is probably a better way to, I guess, contextualise that. So there is more of a savoury element, but really lovely, pretty red fruit, verging on black fruit. again, jumps out of the glass, beautiful in the mouth, and again, like you said, there's not that sort of sweet flick at the end. It's very, very nice long finish, much like the classic. Cleansing, makes you want to drink more. Like Ben was saying, there's that lovely ripe fruit that will go well with something like this, and I'm assuming they'll.
So we've tried the 2 flagship wines from Bluestone. Does anyone have any questions from that before the desserts come up and the special treat we have for the dessert one?
Come on, don't be shy. Anything at all.
I bought a bottle of wine, English wine from Tesco.
Mhm.
It was after we did a wine night
Yeah.
here. We did English wine night, and it was great, lovely one. So
Yeah.
I went to Tesco and I bought this bottle with the Bacchus
Yeah.
flavour. It was bloody awful. It was like acid. It was gross.
Yeah.
So my question to you, I guess, is do you don't grow the Bacchus variety of grape?
We don't. We did plant. There's a little bit of a joke. So we planted about 100 vines, and I've just recently. The reason why we're doing it is just to prove how rubbish it is.
Right. But traditionally, it seems like English wine always had this great variety, and it always seems to come from the sort of southeast.
Mm.
So,
I'm really sorry. I phased out then.
to be regular.
I was just really intrigued by your question, but I didn't hear the question. I
So,
was listening too hard.
this great variety of Bacchus
Yeah.
seems to be favoured by English
Yes.
wine
Yes.
makers. And it seems to come
Why?
Yes.
It's a really good question.
And then you have to mix it.
Blend
Blend it.
Yeah.
Or as I said, cut it. You have the grape varieties to make it palatable.
Yeah, I think depending on where it comes from and the year, I think Bacchus, again, for me, is truly a Marmite wine. It's very floral. It's very typically in the UK, it's elderflower. That is not everyone's cup of tea. It can be a bit much. It's I would probably liken it almost to like a Gewürztraminer. Has anyone had Gewürz? Yeah. So again, like it's like Turkish delight, like super floral, and not a lot of people like it. Well, that's not true. Some people don't. Some people do. As with all wine. But Bacchus, yeah, it can be a bit too floral in my opinion. I think some people do it really well. I prefer it again, something that's had a bit more like complex winemaking to it. So actually not use it. So stainless will sort of retain its typical characteristics, the florality, the kind of again citrus core, very easy drinking. But again, I like something that has actually been barrel aged, or again something that's been a bit more playful with it. That again can add texture and layers to the wine. And I don't know if that's my preferred style. Like with sparkling wine, I guess that's what we're trying to do with sparkling wine. So with still wines, I'd probably look to do the same thing from my point of view. Yeah, again in a cooler year. So if it's a 2021 vintage, again, even in something like 2019, depending on again where it's coming from, it might be a little bit on the greener side, so not as ripe. So that might again, not be as pleasant. So yeah, I think Marmite for me. Marmite for me. Bacchus for me. Don't give up on it, because I think again there are some really good producers out there doing some really good things, but sometimes you get a miss. And that happens, I guess, with all wines. But yeah, don't give up on it. There are some good producers, and I think Ben, would be a great person to recommend. Like one person that I could recommend that I really like, but again, it's more of their. So it's Chapel Down, which I'm sure everyone would have heard of. Was it a Chapel Down wine that you bought? Because I think they Chapel Down are in Tesco's.
Probably was in Tesco.
Yeah, but their Kit's Coty range, so their premium range.
Where are they?
Kit's Coty are in. Kit's Coty. Oh my god, my words. Chapel Down are in Kent,
Yeah.
but they do.
Possibly, yeah.
They
It was definitely sort of that sort of area.
Yeah. So do they only do estate fruit, or do they buy fruit as well? I think they buy fruit. So again, the thing is with that, I think Kit's Coty from Kent, from Chapel Down, will all be estate. So they've got a vineyard called Kit's Coty. Again, a really beautiful vineyard, fantastic fruit, very consistent in quality, and it is definitely like a level above the rest. And they've got a range of their Kit's Coty range, like sparkling still Chardonnay, the Bacchus. That for me is less typical of what I think. It's not as floral. It's kind of a bit more muted.
Yeah.
But again, it's got a bit more character to it on the palate, a bit more texture. I think they do barrel age a proportion of it, which helps. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of Bacchus, if I'm honest. But then again, I like a wine that has a bit more of an interesting winemaking story. I guess that might be inherently from obviously what we do. and that's why again my preference of wine changes. I like to know where it's grown, who grew it, did they do something a bit different. I guess that's why you end up drinking friends' wines as well, because obviously it's a bit of support, but also you know that it was done with love and care and a bit of experimental passion as well, I suppose. But yeah. Sorry. So don't give up on it. Try some more Bacchus. Don't choose that Bacchus. Yeah. Anything else?
So, what are your plans for like 10, 15 years? How much are you holding back? What are you looking to do to go to that? Not necessarily next level, because but you know what I mean? The and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough one to answer. We'd love to build a winery. That was kind of in our 10 to 12 year plan, which would have come between 2025 and 2027. But again, I think that has been pushed back a couple of years because of COVID. Just kind of taking stock, the farm business has seen a bit of it's been revitalised. It's seen a bit more sort of oomph, and it's doing a little bit better. So that means that we're not totally entitled. Like we said about the planting, we didn't plant the other side partly because of that, and I can't now convert the soft play area into a winery, so that's a bit of a shame. Well, we have talked about it. There is a winery. There's a winery in Kent that has a helter-skelter in their winery, which is quite cool. So maybe we could do something like that. I don't know if it's for public use, by the way. That might just be for start. I don't know. But, or maybe it was just a PR thing. I don't know. But so definitely a winery. Again, planting, but maybe not. Like either next to our site. We quite like the idea of looking at other sites again. So looking at we quite like to find some clay soil. Toby's quite keen on making more of a Chablis style. I'm assuming it's still when you say. I think growing Chardonnay on clay is what you want to do, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So again, I guess it's exploring our local area. We know it fairly well. So going out on the west side of Salisbury, in one of the other valleys. So again, kind of looking at different parcels again. So there's some really nice valleys in and around Salisbury, and it would be nice to have a vineyard almost in all of them, so could then create a single site wine from those vineyards. That would be a great ambition, but again, there's a lot of cost in that. Really getting into the nitty-gritty of the site. So single site, single varietal in some instances, single site blends. So where I talked about 20,000 bottles, and we've got 5 of each of the classes in the cuvee, maybe even going down to a couple of barrels worth of a particular wine, so really going small. That appeals to me quite a lot. We haven't discussed it at length, have we?
No.
If it makes more work for him, then he might not be so keen. But we actually something that he's made a rod for him back here. So we've just recently taken on a small vineyard in Hampshire as well. So but it's really small. It's literally an acre. So very, very small. So again, and we have discussed this as a family as whether that becomes our niche. Again, so it fits with us being a small producer, but again, kind of sampling different sort of satellite vineyards. So basically, people who fancy it as a nice thing, we've got some money, so we'll plant a vineyard on our back garden type thing. But then they realise how much work it is, and then don't really fancy this. So that's kind of how this one came about. So if we sort of find more areas like that, but that are on good sites, I think that would be an interesting way of doing it, because no one else would really look at that, because it would be a lot of work.
Yeah. How are you going to service that vineyard in Hampshire then?
It'll be hand. I won't be able to use my tractors or machinery, and it's 2,000 vines, so it'll take me a good day, a week maybe, to surface it all and spray by hand and mow by hand.
As if you didn't have enough work already.
I was going to say.
So it's about 40 minutes away from where we are. So yeah, you drive there and do his thing and come back. Yeah. And we're not allowed to go in the loo in the vineyard either. So we have to go to a little cafe in the village to go to the loo and get lunch. Yeah, it's quite fun. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe she'll come round on that one, but that's it. For the time being, it's coffee and coffee loo break. Without getting into too much detail.
And where did the name come from?
Yeah, good question. Where we're close to Stonehenge, it's the vicinity to the Stonehenge. It was kind of a nod to the history and heritage of the local area. So the Bluestones, quarried supposedly from Bluestone in Wales, Priscilla Bluestone. I had thought I'd seen, but I haven't since been able to find it again, that they were actually quarried more locally near Marlborough, which would make a lot more sense. But again, there is actually only one bit of bluestone standing still in the inner circle at Stonehenge, which was a little bit disappointing when I found that out. But who knows? We might unearth some bluestone in our woodlands, maybe. Watch this space.
Brilliant. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much to Nat and Toby. I think this was great. So I'll just give you